Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm very excited today to welcome an old friend back into the studio. She's been here before. Her name is Corena Chase.
Hello.
She's a communications and leadership coach. She has so much experience, you guys. You need to listen to all these nuggets that she drops. She doesn't even know. It happens, comes out of her mouth regularly when I hang out with her. So she's a good person to be around or at least listen to on this episode. She works for both global Fortune 100 companies and also a lot of smaller companies, helping people navigate rapid growth, changing cultures. She works everywhere from financial services to law to venture capital, tech, media. She draws on a career like I do as an actor. That's how we met years and years ago in New York, both as young actors, and then both went different ways and have come back to a very similar path for ourselves, which is kind of fun. And I'm bringing her in. Last time she was here, she did the episode on coaching and the power of questions. Because if you like listening to Corena today, you should go back and listen to that episode because it's really helpful to revisit it. Even if you've heard it before, I listen to it sometimes to get reminders. But we're going to talk about today. She also is the co-author of a book, and it's a really great book because it's a quick read. It also has lots of little juicy nuggets in it. And so we're going to talk about it today and kind of take a deep dive into a couple of the points that they talk about. But it's called the Five Lost Superpowers, Why We Lose Them and How to Get Them Back. So if you want to check it out on Amazon, I highly recommend it, or on Audible. But we're going to dive into a few of them because I was rereading it the other day and thinking about how clever some of these were to talk about in terms of people in their careers. So Corena, welcome.
Thanks, Christine. Heck of an intro. Thank you.
There's so many more things I could tell, but that's for another day. So let's dive into this book because you gave me a copy when it first came out, but now I just saw it on my bookshelf the other day and started looking at it. And that's when I gave you a call to do this because I was like, we need to talk about this book again because I do think it has some really key points that is really applicable today, just as it was when it was first published. But first of all, before we dive in, can you just share kind of what first sparked the interest for you guys? And I know it wasn't just you had some co-authors on it, but kind of exploring this idea of lost superpowers. And was there some sort of moment or experience or something that made you dive into this topic?
Well, yeah, this was written by me and some of my colleagues at the JM Read Group, which is another company that I've done a lot of work with. And in our leadership training, we would talk about curiosity quite a lot as something that you can channel to be a more effective leader, a more effective coach. You know, when you're curious about things, it sparks so much intrinsic motivation to keep learning and better understand things. I love curiosity as like a networking tool when I'm going into various situations where I know that I need to make conversation with people and meet people. I kind of think about, okay, what am I actually curious about? Like in order to keep this conversation from being kind of shallow and feeling like just the work that you have to do when you network, like what am I really curious about that I can dig into and ask these folks about. So anyway, we talked about curiosity a lot in our training. Playfulness actually is something that we would bring up to bring play into the workplace, to bring play into the way that you sort of explore various different ways of interacting with folks, and resilience, certainly. So anyway, so the five lost superpowers are authenticity, curiosity, playfulness, compassion, and
resilience.
Is that the one I didn't say? So we talked about them in various ways in our training, and certainly they would come up in my coaching. And when the pandemic hit, we obviously could not be traveling around and doing training. And so we thought, let's use this time where we're all sitting at home to write a book about these superpowers, really, right? These things that people could channel. And I think just casually in conversation over the years, we had talked about how it seemed like these were things that we had, that it wasn't just that we had to develop the skill of curiosity or authenticity or playfulness, that there was a sort of reclaiming of it. And because when you look at a lot of these behaviors, children have them in spades. And so the question sort of arose for us, like, well, wait a minute, we've had these things in us. And so much of what we do in the workplace and through the school systems is kind of lose our connection, right, to these wonderful qualities that are in us. And so not just how do we like develop them, but how do we reclaim them?
Mm. I love it. I love that idea. And we're going to after we talk about it a little more, I want to get back to that idea of like tips for people to reclaim some of these things. Cause I love that idea of that it's not just like building them, but they're already in there.
Yeah.
These are things that already live in us and that it's a way of finding ourselves back to it. You said something interesting in the beginning about using the superpower of curiosity for yourself for networking. And I was reminded, I heard this great story from Marcus Buckingham, who's this researcher that I quote a lot. And he gave a story I heard once on a podcast where he said the same thing, is that he had to figure out a way. He hates networking. He hated going to these things, but it's part of the job, right? To meet people. And a lot of people out there tell me the same thing when they're not sure how to network or it feels uncomfortable. And that he said what he realizes that he hates networking, but he loves interviewing. And if he could think of networking as just a way to find one or two people in that room that he wants to interview and do a mini interview session with them. And I thought that's another way of saying, how can I be curious about a couple of people and ignite that kind of power of curiosity to get me through this, but not only that, but two, maybe make this valuable for both myself and the other person, so that it's not just like a way to get through, but it's a way to maybe reclaim, as you say, and make something really positive out of something that we have a negative association with.
It's networking is such a funny thing. I think I used to do work with a consulting firm and I helped onboard a lot of their new hires. And I think over the years, I probably talked to, hundreds of people coming into this organization. And towards the end of our time together, we spent over a week with them. And I would, do kind of some private coaching with them. And I'd ask them like, what are you most nervous about? What worries you the most? And I swear, I think like 65% of them said networking was the thing they were the most worried about doing. It feels so hard and fake, and authenticity is one of our superpowers. So yeah. And it's funny how curiosity is something we do need to reclaim and channel. Like it's part of our job a little bit to be curious, right? Because we work with other people, we have to get to know them and understand them. We have to ask good, curious questions. But it's funny how, by the end of a long day or your mood can sort of shut down your curiosity a little bit. So you have to be a little intentional about it, I think, and really think like, well, wait a minute, here's the setting, here's the kind of people that are going to be there. What am I genuinely curious about? But it's in there for us to access, I think, but it doesn't just happen.
It doesn't just happen. Well, but to your point of reclaiming, I have to tell you a funny story. You just reminded me. My daughter, who's older, when she was young, she had this funny habit. We would go on trips together and we traveled all the time and we'd get on an airplane and inevitably you can't get 4 seats together, right? And inevitably somebody would be off by themselves. And so we assumed that it would be my husband or myself and that the parent would sit with the 2 little kids. And every time my little daughter, so we're talking like 5 years old, 6 years old, would say, I'll sit by myself. And we always thought it was so funny. And then we would watch her and she would go sit with strangers, probably business people that are like, oh, great. Now I got this little kid next to me. Like, where are the parents? Like looking around, and we'd watch from afar. And then she'd start chatting and they'd start chatting. And then pretty soon she's like helping people put their bags under her seat because she doesn't need the leg room, or she's got people talking about this, or she knew this whole guy's history. She'd say, oh, guys, this is my friend Connor from Connecticut. He has 3 kids. And she was networking on that plane. Okay. And we would just think it was so funny. And my son would just roll his eyes and there would be nothing more that he would hate in this world, right? Than to talk to strangers. So I said to her after one of these trips, I said, Emma, why do you always want to sit, with strangers? And she goes, well, it's just another opportunity for someone to like me. And I thought, oh my God, if we could all just go into the world like that. So I kept that in my head because I thought it was so earnest the way that she said it and true, because inevitably people would love her, right? And she still has that magic. Like I see her now. My husband just had a gala for his charity the other night and she flew in for it. And she was the same thing, like working that everybody came up to me and was like, oh my God, she's amazing. Da, 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 da. So anyway,
she's a chip off the block. We know where she gets that.
Well, I took it from her. Now I go, you know what? when I go into those rooms, I say that little mantra to myself. It's just another opportunity for someone to like me. And it makes me laugh a little bit and not take it so seriously. But also, people want to connect and everybody's nervous about
That's
this. So if we can just kind of delve into that childhood reclaiming of not judging ourselves or being hard on ourselves, but that people want to be your friend and people want to connect and they'll be so happy because they're probably nervous too.
And you just touched on one of the other superpowers, which is playfulness, right? That thing of just going in and being like, well, just another day for more people to like me. And that's playful and it brings this kind of lightness and oh my gosh, we're all so serious about everything, especially when it comes to work. And it really channeling playfulness, it's such a superpower. And like you said, other people want that too. They want things to be lighter because it's all
so let's talk about playfulness. Because I think playfulness was the one that surprised me the most that you had as one of the 5. Yet when I thought about it, I felt seen because I feel like that's the one that I really resonate probably in my true self, my true self with a lot because obviously we do a lot of our work in schools. So we have to bring element of play into teaching leadership. So we've always done it that way and then translated that now into the workplace. And what I have found is that people at work want to do the same.
For sure.
It's the same as kids in the classroom. But when you guys were looking at it, in the playfulness realm, did you find that you got a lot of more questions around that superpower? Did you find that one was the one people had the hardest time or where did you find that?
I think it's similar to how you responded to it. Like at first, maybe at first, but as soon as you think about it for a few minutes, it's a little bit of well, of course, we're more expansive, we're more open, we're more imaginative. When we're in a playful mode, we take ourselves a little bit less seriously. Like everybody knows work is serious enough just by being called work.
Yeah.
And the room that there is for imagination, we tell a story in the book about these Intel executives that they were in trouble. They were the makers of these memory chips and they were losing market share and there was going to be a board meeting and they were sure they were going to get fired if they didn't have some big idea to rescue them, but they didn't really have any ideas. This is what they knew how to do. So they did this thing where they pretended to fire themselves and then they walked in and pretended that they were like the new fancy executives that the board had hired after it fired them. Like, so what would these fancy new executives come up with and talk about? Like, why would it be that they would be hired? And so they had a whole conversation as these new executives and came up with, the solution. And they started creating microprocessors, which is what they're now known for today. But they did this kind of playful exercise in order to come up with that. And, I know I go into a lot of my work is going into organizations and doing role play. We role play difficult conversations and feedback. And, we teach coaching through role play. And at first people are like, oh, God, there's anything I would rather do in the world than role play. It sounds so scary because we're not used to doing those kinds of things in the workplace. But I swear, usually within 10 minutes, people are like, I'll go next. They kind of see what happens when you just channel this more playful, imaginative side of you. It's spontaneous. Anything can happen. And people learn when they're in that mode in a way that, in my 12 years of doing this, that is when people learn the most, when they're in that kind of, that less restricted, more playful, imaginative, pretending, we're pretending to be other people in another situation. We laugh and people you just learn so much when you're in that mode. So
I love it. It's so true. Like, not only do people learn who are doing it, but the people watching also learn a tremendous part because our brains immediately put ourselves in that situation. You're a little bit on a tightrope. You don't know what's going to happen. You're kind of going, okay. And so everyone's brains wake up and are like, pay attention. And I completely agree with that. People are so hesitant to jump into role play, including myself. It's so funny when I'm a participant, I get so nervous as soon as someone says we're going to do role plays. But once it starts, it's the thing people learn from. You're right. Besides having the real experience, it's probably second to the real experience of going through something hard.
And it's always the thing that people are like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. And then at the end, oh, I wish we'd had more time to do more of that. Because you just learn so much from being in it and watching it. And I love what you just said about that. It kind of wakes you up, the unknowns and the uncertainty about it. Like it does wake you up in a different way. And that in a way is what play is, right? It's so you're doing things without a specific end in mind. Like most of what we do at work is so structured and goal oriented, and we're working towards this particular thing. And play brings in an element of like, well, let's just see what happens, right? And let's try this and let's try that. And that's what kids are so good at, is just, they'll make anything into anything. You give them a pile of wooden blocks and there's 100 different outcomes of what's going to happen. It's kind of sad. We talk about this in the book, what's happening with so many toys like Legos, now it's all these kits where you make this one thing versus the whole thing about play, and that kids are so good at. There's all these examples of these like challenges and puzzles and things that require iteration and experimentation, where kindergartners outperform CEOs all the time in these activities, because kindergartners are so good at just kind of saying, oh, let's try that. And let's try that. Oh, we could make this straw thing into like a sword and it could do this. Like there's so many ways that they think creatively, because there's just so fewer known outcomes and boundaries and restrictions, right, on the way they do things. So obviously, like bringing some of that into the workplace would be so advantageous, especially when you're looking at process, even just like boring things like processes, and how could we do this differently, and how could we do this better, and what else could we use this for? Kindergartners are just better at that.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's why IDEO did such a good job of redoing like design thinking and making it playful. I know that there's a video out there that I think it was on like 2020 or Dayline or something back in the day that I made my whole company watch at some point. And it was really about exactly that when you break it down. Like, how do you take this problem and how do we make, in a playful way, how do we come up with a solution that helps and encourages better brainstorming and better ideas that are more innovative and so forth. I think the question sometimes is like, if you're a manager and you have so many things like KPIs or, different goals that you have to achieve, or, all the pressures that up and coming managers feel, how do you have the guts or the clarity, or how do you start with injecting some of this where it can feel really daunting if you don't have experience already seeing it? Like what are ways that people that want to try this with their teams can take baby steps towards it?
Like bringing in more playfulness.
Yeah.
It's hard because you want it to be authentic, right? Which is another of the superpowers. I was just speaking with a client last week who's like, I really want my team to have more lightness. I want us to be able to be more bonded, but like doing these kind of like icebreaker questions felt so hokey to her. She's like, that doesn't feel authentic to me. It feels forced. So, we really just talked about ways to play around, like even the way in which you think about that. If you think of it as playing around with asking your team, just like, what are some different questions? It doesn't have to be like a quote icebreaker question, but like, what are some questions about what they're doing or what they want to focus on, or what would make things better for them? Whatever the kind of slow walk towards different kinds of questions and relating. I mean, they all relate to like using your curiosity and their curiosity to point you towards things that you could think about or do or structure differently. But I think one of the things managers do is they take a question like that and they put all the burden on themselves of coming up with a solution versus like, we'll take it to the team. Say to the team, like, hey guys, we're not having enough fun. Like these meetings are so dry and I can tell you're bored and I'm kind of bored. And like, what can we do here to make this more interesting? What do we need to do to kind of wake us all up and think about this in a different way? And, whether it's having different people lead the meeting or different people, doing things differently. I think it really is like it's going to depend on you and the team and how you're structured.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. And it doesn't have to be you. If you are not seen as a very playful person, it doesn't mean that you can't orchestrate that. That may not feel authentic for you, but I think there's probably somebody in your group who people know has a little bit more of a creative spark or is a little bit funny or a little bit whatever. And they're probably going to love to ask a question.
Yeah.
This is Bob's question corner, and it's going to be the beginning of every meeting, and he's going to come in every time with a fun question that is going to be absolutely authentic to him, that is going to make that opening. We don't call it icebreakers anymore. This is another tip that I've learned lately, is that icebreaker has such a bad connotation from SNL or skits or whatever it is. So we call it an opening whip around. And we talk about, before we do it, the science of why it's important to do it, how it helps your meetings and so forth, so that they realize that like, yeah, we're doing this because this is a thing that helps our brains engage. But I love your idea of going to the group for it and potentially having somebody who isn't you lead that part of it can be even more powerful, and how wonderful to delegate some things of these meetings to make them.
You can take turns, there's just so many ways to go back to the group and find out. And I just usually think like whatever you're struggling with as a manager, like 80% of it, you could just go to the group and be like, so here's what I'm struggling with. What do y'all think? and even that is just more playful and opens up a whole different way of being with your team and problem solving together. And there's authenticity, there's transparency, right?
There's curiosity.
Yes.
There's all of those superpowers in that one question, like it's really powerful. And also they'll be like, oh yeah, I'd love to talk about this. So I think those are two good tips for playfulness, is that tip of what you just said and going to the group. I think also what was said earlier of role play, like especially, I mean, it's so obvious with sales teams that it helps. There's so much data that shows that it helps if you're doing those sales calls through role plays first.
And you can make it it's almost sometimes less scary if it's spontaneous, so if you're strategizing with somebody, like how you're going to go to a certain client with us, you just be like, you know what, let's just do it. Like I'm the client and you're you. We know where the pushback is going to be. So I'm going to role play that client and give you the pushback, and let's just like play around with how you're going to handle it. So it's like incorporating the word play, right?
Yes.
Into like, let's play around with this a little bit. Or
yes.
Even if you're not in role play mode, you could be like, well, let's just like play around with what some different outcomes might be.
Yeah.
So you bring that word into the environment, and it just kind of like lightens it up and takes the pressure off. I mean, the other way I think playfulness is really important is like, if you are thinking about something like your own authenticity or changing the way you want to operate with your team. So to think of that as, like I think a lot of the ways that authenticity comes up in coaching is people, they're not sure how to like flex to the norms and rules of their environment and do what they have to do and also be their authentic selves. And they're trying to figure out how it cannot be so stressful or difficult for them sort of show up to work the way they need to show up. And so we talk about like playing around with the edges of their authenticity. It's like, well, what feels constrictive to you? And what could you maybe play around with at the edges of the way that you do things, or the way you're responding to things, so that you can see where there's room to either be more yourself and see what happens and trust that it might be okay, or play around with like doing something differently, but in a playful way, so that it isn't like I'm flexing to the rules and norms of this place. It's like, all right, well, what does it feel like to be more like this guy? Or like, what is it? I had a client once who, she'd been told she needed to be more assertive and she needed to sort of take command more. She didn't have any good role models. So I was like, well, who in the world that you observe does do that in a way? And she said, Olivia Pope from Scandal. She loved the way Kerry Washington kind of kicks butt in that show. And I was like, great. So like, just go to your meetings being like, what would Olivia Pope do here?
Love it.
And just play with it and have fun with it. And so, and I've done that with a lot of people, just like looking for role models or ways to be playful as they try to sort of flex to their environments or show up in different ways, take on feedback. It can feel so daunting. And a lot of times it threatens people's sense of authenticity. So it's like, okay, well then how can I have fun with it versus feel like, oh, I've got to figure out this thing.
I love that. That's a great tip out there too, to give them that, what would somebody else do? Somebody that you could imagine yourself being, right? That's a great tip. And I think there's something else that you did that I just want to point out to our listeners, because it's maybe obvious to you, but it's not always to everybody else. When you set up that role play, just in our little quick example, and that's what Corena did, was she showed you literally how to set up the role play so that it's not like, okay, guys, we're going to role play a situation with a client. And, it wasn't so heavy. So just that idea of playfulness is also a lighter tone in your voice, a lighter, like, je ne sais quoi, like, let's see what happens. Like, you kind of almost have to practice that kind of lightness of how you would do it is going to set that moment up so much more playfully and impactful and for better performances, because people they don't think that this isn't a death moment. This isn't like, if I fail, this is terrible.
Yes.
It's like, okay, it's light. We're having fun. Mm-hmm. And that is super important if you are facilitating and you are facilitating if you're a manager leading something like that in that moment. So I thought that was
yeah, you're right. It's not like, okay, let's figure out how to get this right. It's like, well, let's play around with this and see what happens. And maybe something will work out here. Maybe we'll find it. Maybe we'll discover it. Maybe we'll learn something.
And most of the time when you ask people like moments that they really figured out something or had an aha moment, it's not when they're thinking about it. It's when they're doing something else that it comes to their brains anyway. So, All right. So you mentioned authenticity a couple of times, and I know that's the chapter in the book that you you worked on the most was that
Mm-hmm.
superpower of authenticity. That was really the deep dive that you took in as a writer. And I'm curious because I think people ask that all the time. Like you talked about the fringes of your authenticity. And I think that's a really good note for people because we don't know who we are at every moment, especially when we're young. Like we figure these things out more as we get older. And so those edges are probably in the middle actually of your authenticity. So,
That's right.
look for those. So that's one really good thought. But what else do you say to people who are really searching for like, how do I tap into more of my authentic self? Because when we do leadership work, more and more, what people want is transparency and authenticity. And some people are like, wait, how do I be authentic? How do I make sure? And it's such a funny question, but it's so true. So what was your thoughts? What did you guys come to what did you come to when you
Well, yeah, it's really those two things, right? It's how do I myself be more authentic or feel more authentic, especially if you're in an environment or situation where you feel like your full self or who you are doesn't quite mesh. And I think for that, it's really important also to think about it is our job. We can flex. There's a difference between flexing your behavior in order to, be more successful or impactful or influential in a certain environment and like totally not being yourself. Human beings flex all the time. I talk about like how when I was a teenager, I equally loved to spend time with my grandparents and to party in the woods with my friends. I'm two totally different versions of myself, right? But I love them both and they're both me. So it's sort of thinking about, when you're with different people, you're sort of leaning into different behaviors and things about yourself. You're still you, right? In all of those settings. So work is just sort of one of those places where obviously you're going to flex your behaviors and do things a little bit differently. The situation, the people require it. So what is the version of you there that still feels like you, but that is the most effective version of you in that place, right? And that's where that kind of playing around with the edges things. And for me personally, I think I was attached to my authenticity in a way that was very limiting, right? I sort of felt like for a lot of my life, I think I was overprotective of some version of my authenticity that I had to let the grip go a little bit and learn that, oh, wait a minute, I can do this version of networking and still feel like myself. And I can sort of give this leader what they want or give this group of people what they want, even though it's not necessarily the first place I would go and still be like me. And that required me to sort of let go of my sort of like own narrow vision of myself and my own narrow definitions of what felt authentic to me. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that's really important to remember. I say in the thing, Walt Whitman, the poet who says, I am vast, I contain multitudes, that most of us contain more multitudes maybe than we recognize. But in terms of leaders, yeah, people do want to see authenticity. It's wildly important.
I have a thought real quick.
Please.
While you're getting, I've been doing a lot of speaking down in the South recently, right? And I grew up in Texas, and my whole life growing up in Texas, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to go to New York. I wanted to be an actor. So my biggest compliment that I could get when I was growing up was that I didn't have a Texas accent, right? And I would work very hard to have that very middle American, nondescript in my mind accent was like the height of compliment to me. And I could do it unless later if I have a few margaritas, it starts to come out, right? My true self. But anyway, I've been doing a lot of speaking down in the South. And one of the things that I'm finding is one, I'm having so much fun, but two, I think what's happening is being around all those folks and hearing their accents all the time, I naturally start to talk more like them. My y'alls come out, my kind of inner self starts to come out. And with that comes this like part of myself that is very Texan, that's very kind of a little twangy, a little bit loose, a little bit like, not too worried about what she says or being politically incorrect even, or just like there's a certain looseness and humor that comes with that very naturally, very quickly. And I'm getting such good responses down there and so forth. And I had this epiphany that part of it is that it's touching upon that deeper part of me that's kind of, I locked away a long time ago in the thought of that wasn't appropriate for who I wanted to be in this world. And what I'm finding now in my mid 50s is like, that may be the actual person, like the actual thing that makes me truly more authentic and therefore more powerful. If I have the guts to reclaim that a little bit in my regular life, you
so
know?
good. It's so good. That's right. And that is that thing of playing around with, well, wait a minute. Let me try to actually just be a little bit more. What happens if my accent comes out? What happens if I throw some yells around? Oh my gosh, this is actually going really well.
Really well.
Yeah. But it's so funny.
And I'll even stop and I'll be like, I just said a y'all. Did y'all hear that? Because they know I'm a New Yorker. So it's like, why is she talking like this all of a sudden?
Well, I started adopting y'all myself, if you can believe it, this Mainer here, because it's inclusive. I was doing so much role play with people that would say, you guys. I was like I'm an executive and you're talking to me, and they kept calling me you guys. And I was like, I don't think I like that as you know, as a female CEO, I don't really like this 35-year-old referring to me as you guys. We gotta figure out something else here.
Yeah. So who knew? Y'all. I tried forever to get that out of my vocabulary. Is now.
I think it's good. I think
better.
It works. It's funny that you said I had the guts to try that, because what we did in this book at the end of each section, of the end of each superpower, was give people a tool belt, which was for leaders, meant for leaders and managers, some quick takeaways from each superpower. And we had an acronym, and the acronym for the authenticity one is GUTS. So the GUTS are, for, in terms of leadership, genuine connection is one thing, right? For authenticity is finding ways to create a more genuine connection with your people, which is absolutely what people crave and want, which usually means a little bit of sharing, right? Transparency, vulnerability. Yes. And obviously that doesn't mean, sharing your deepest desires and fears, but some vulnerability in terms of what's going on for you. Even the thing of like, hey guys, I feel like we need to be more playful. I feel like things are getting too serious, or or I'm really struggling with X, or whatever it is. Let's figure this out. I
can't solve this problem.
All of that. All of that creates more connection. Curiosity helps create more connection. Actually, the icebreaker question, part of that is that like, there's no genuine curiosity behind it. Versus like, what am I really curious about with what's going on with my team? Like, what would I like to know? What would inform me? What would help me be a better manager for them? Like, what question would that be? And if you ask it in a curious way, it's going to come across as authentic. The U for guts is unloose a variety of ideas and styles around you. So, encouraging multiple ways of sharing information, of people giving their perspectives, because you want to encourage other people feeling like they can be authentic, which means they might not communicate exactly the way you communicate. They might not even think in the same way that you think, and sort of recognizing, are people trying to contribute and share ideas and be at this table in different ways? And how can I make more space for that?
I love it. What's the T?
The T is trust, right? So showing people that you trust them enough to share more. When you say, hey guys, I'm not really sure how to handle X, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm wondering about that, you're creating trust. Oh, they trust me enough to make me part of this problem with them. So that, again, that transparency with what's working, what's not working, what you need, what you're thinking about. People love that. They get to be more authentic. You get to be more authentic. And finally, this sort of follows everything I'm saying, but the S is share stories. So share stories about how you got where you got, what you're struggling with, what you have struggled with, what you're thinking about. I mean, I just can't tell you. I'm sure you've seen the same thing, Christine, especially I've worked with a lot of younger folks in different work environments, and they crave role models. They crave people around them where they can see them living a life that they might want to live. And if you are pretending that things are better than they are, and that you have everything figured out, and that you've got the perfect work-life balance, whatever it is, they know
you're an Instagram.
Off. Yeah, they just know something's off, and they're like, I don't see how I'm going to be that person. So I just think as leaders, the more that we share, the easier it is for other people. It makes you more authentic. It makes other people feel like they can be authentic. So those are a few.
I love that, because sometimes we think that we're being self-indulgent if we share stories, but it is the thing that people will come up to me later, even in my own teams, and say, oh, I really appreciated that you shared that, especially if your story has some bit of struggle in it, because they can feel that, and maybe some way that you're overcoming it. I mean, it's the oldest thing. We used to do this as cavemen and cavewomen around the campfires, right? We would tell stories. That's the one thing we know. We see that in cave drawings. So I really appreciate you, Corena, coming in here and sharing some stories with us today. And I really encourage you guys to get this book or to listen to it. There's great ways, great tips, great things, as she said, in these tool belts for leaders on how you can incorporate and reclaim these 5 superpowers. And I think you did a great job kind of discerning this from all of your work that you and your co-authors did. So thanks, Corena, for coming in. We'll have you back again. She's an expert coach. How can people get in touch with you if they need to?
They can email me.
There you go.
Corena.chase@gmail.com.
Yeah. Chase Performance Strategies is her website as well, right?
It's actually my website is corenachase.com.
There you go. She just needs her name, corenachase.com. That's pretty cool.
I changed it.
I love
just
it.
Have it be my name. Why not?
Why not? It's authentic. It's powerful. Reclaim it.
It's the benefit of having Corena be my first name because nobody else has that name.
Oh, that is good.
So it's out there. It's out there for the taking, unless somebody steals it. Now that I've said that,
you have it first, babe. All right. Thank y'all for listening. And
thank y'all. Good to be with y'all.
We'll listen in next week and listen to Corena's other episode if you get a chance on Powerful Questions. Thank you guys. Thank y'all. Not you guys. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all. And thank you, Christine. It's always such a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.